Down. We're gonna do some advanced layout stuff.
Important part, make sure you see the guy in the check shirt because he has the door prizes.
Yeah, come over here, they're giving away prizes. All you gotta do is sit in these chairs for a little bit. We're gonna talk about layout. I don't know if you guys were at the first episode, but at 10 o'clock this morning we talked about basic layout. First, let me introduce myself.
Who are you?
Well, my name's Rob Roderick and I'm with the National Tile Contractors Association. I'm a technical trainer, so I go around doing educational programs and workshops all over the country. But today we're going to be talking about layout. And wherever we go, we always teach the industry standards and guidelines. So how many people here are familiar with the Tile Council North America Handbook? Raise your hand if you've seen that before.
You have one? Have you opened it? Okay, you're good. You can now sit in the front row.
All right.
If you don't use these documents, they can be your worst enemy. If you use them, they can be your best friend. Because these are going to give you the guidelines that you need for proper layout, for proper setting, installation processes. All that material's in here to help us do a better job. So thank you for doing that. These are invaluable. So Rob, what are we going to do on a little layout today?
Well, we've learned in our first section that our standards say that we need to have layouts that are centered and balanced and without cuts less than half tile when possible. So let's go ahead and center this layout here. We got a little floor here. We basically have 48 inches, so I'll have him mark 24. We're gonna get our center line. We're gonna go to the other end. And when we get this first reference line, this control line, we want to come off an exterior wall if we can. Generally speaking, when they frame a building, framers start from the outside and work their way in. If we don't have an exterior wall, the best next option would be the longest wall in the particular room that we're getting ready to lay out. And we went over in the first section about using these lines to find out the relationships of the walls with each other. Make sure that, you know, walls are parallel with each other and perpendicular.
Well, we already knew that.
We want to, yeah, we've already checked that out and everything was good. This wall down here is kind of the rough one. So we're going to
we know that these walls are parallel.
So we got 8 foot, so let's mark that at 4 foot. And again, if we were doing this on the wall, we're looking for walls that might be out of plumb or ceilings that might be out of level. When that happens, that's going to affect our layout. We need to know ahead of time because we can, manipulate our layout in a way that would allow us to hide those areas that might be out of square.
So we've got a small area here, so we can actually use a framing square and a straight edge. If we were in a much larger area, like the area where you're sitting, we would use our 3, 4, 5 right triangle to get a larger area because it's more accurate. Because if we use that framing square, and I'm going to go from me to Timmy and lay this area out, I could be off by 3/8 to a half an inch very, very easily. So we want to make it as accurate as we can, so we're going to use that 3, 4, 5 triangle most times in a larger area. Small bathroom like this one, this is very accurate. So Rob, we've got our mark.
Yep.
So what we're going to do is set that 12 by 12 on a diagonal.
Right. And we went over the first part. You know, we have 2 ways to center. We can center a grout joint. You can see if we do that, we're going to have a nice big cut. Or we can center the center of the tile. Now, one way is always going to give us a bigger cut. You know, we may be centered and balanced, but we want to fulfill both expectations that we find in ANSI. Be centered and balanced with no cuts less than half tile when possible. And it lists some times when it's not possible. But if we were going to lay this on a 45, it's a little bit more complicated. Got a speed square right here. So we have one option of just lining it up like we've got here. Our 4 points. Then we can lay some tile, see what our cuts are going to be.
And this is not a rectified tile, Rob, so our grout joint's got to be 3/16.
Yeah, 3/16. That was the other thing we talked about. You know, Lots of times when you're doing installations, the homeowner might say, I want you to butt those tiles together. I want the smallest grout joint possible. And our handbook talks about that, our standards talk about that. It basically says we should never have a grout joint less than a 1/16 of an inch. And our grout joint should be no smaller than 3 times the deviation of the tiles themselves. So that means if we got a group of tiles and they deviate in size, let's say a 1/16 of an inch from each other, the smallest grout joint we should have with that particular group of tiles is 3/16 of an inch. That's in the handbook. So if you do have people that want you to butt tile together, or maybe have a grout joint that's a little bit too tight, that's a reference that you can use to your benefit. So it looks like we got a pretty nice cut here, but there's always 2 ways to center a layout. So this is one way, which we have a nice cut. The other way that we would center a 45 layout is I'm just going to find the center of this tile. So I'm going halfway down, and then I put this on a 45. Now this is going to give me equal size cuts as well. Let's lay that out so they can see what we're talking about here.
So we use the same 3/16 grout joint.
Yeah. So we're doing half of a half.
Half to half.
Yeah.
If we had more time, we would actually grid this pattern where we would throw a 45-degree angle, and we would pop our lines on a 45-degree angle and lay the tile in that fashion.
So we can see we got 3 inches and 3 inches.
Hey, we're
over here.
balanced.
Yeah.
3-inch cut. The last cut we had was about a 10.5-inch cut. Which would we pick? The 10.5. So this may not be our best layout, but it is an alternative to what we have.
Yeah.
So we're good with this one?
Yeah. So the next thing we're going to talk about is herringbone, and herringbone on a 45. There's 2 ways to lay that out as well. And I'll mark this tile to show you both options. I'm basically going to find the center of this tile. Both directions, the short way and the long way. Okay, so we got perfect. All right, you guys see that? It's right in the center, just measured from here to there and from here to there. Now at this point, I can use my speed square and make an X. Now I can use this X to lay off of my center line to get a centered and balanced herringbone. Get a little bit of it. There we go.
Magic, they line up.
Yeah, there you go. So you can see the cut that
Let's go this way. Oh, you can do that. That's
yeah,
fine.
here you go.
So if we're centered and balanced and we have this laid out the same way, notice that the pieces are exactly the same size on each side. It's not magic, it's just the mathematics of it. Mm-hmm. So we've got a balance there. That's looking really good.
Yeah.
But we could do it another way.
We need to check it both ways. Every time we need to check it. So the other way that we could check this is we find the center here on the end. So just like we did a grout joint, we're going to actually do this on the end of the tile. Perfect. So now I'm going to line up with my square lines here, and where you're going to see that we have a balanced installation, but it's going to be different size tiles. It's going to be smaller. So this cut's going to be the mirror image of that cut over there. All right?
So we've got a small piece.
Yeah. So this isn't as good a way as the other way. We're looking for the way that gives us the best options as far as the biggest cuts. What we want you guys to have is a defendable layout. And the handbook says, centered and balanced when possible, but it gives a list of reasons why you might not be able to do that. And one of them is if the size of the room and the type of the tile doesn't allow it. If you're using a 12 by 24 tile, your cuts are going to be different from right to left than they are in front to back because of the rectangular shape of the tile. Also, a lot of installations, they might come out of an entryway, go down a hallway, back into a kitchen. It's going to be impossible to center in every aspect, right? So you have to think about the focal point, and you need to have communication with the design professional on that job and make sure that you're really clear about what you intend to do. And one great way to show your plans is to grid out the floor. How many of you guys grid out floors to install tiles? Anybody done that before?
How many people are installing tile?
All right.
All the time. Wow, this is better than the first group we had. That's great. We had hardly any installers the first time. But and of that group, how many people grid the floor?
All right.
Wow, our numbers went way down.
Yeah.
We got it.
So let me explain about gridding the floor, and we'll actually do some grid work here. Basically what we're doing is we're popping boxes for the tiles to set in. We're putting chalk line boxes on the floor, and we can lay out, if it's 200 feet, if it's 3,000 feet, we can lay the whole thing out. We figure out what our measurements are. We do lines, and then we square them off of there. We'll show you right here. We're going to actually lay some out right now.
So you want to use 8 bites instead of 12 by 12?
So we got to come up with the grid size, and we don't want a grid size bigger than what we can spread, right? We got to be able to reach in there and actually be able to install the tile.
So we still have a 3/16 joint because this is not a rectified tile, it's a calibrated tile. So go ahead, Rob, what's our
Give me one more
module?
tile.
You want 3?
Yeah, I'm going to count my grout joints. So basically I got 3 tiles and 3 grout joints that I'm measuring here. And it looks like 24 1/4 will be just about right. So we got our grout joint size. I figured 3 tiles, 3 grout joints, 24 1/4. So now I just simply measure off of this line that I have here, 24 1/4. Now, after 24 1/4, we got 4 foot and a half. You just continue to use multiples.
Hey, Rob, if I use this tape, is that all right?
Sometimes these tapes can read a little different. So whoever's doing the layout, I would use the same tape because it can change a little bit, even if it's off by an eighth of an inch.
You want to make sure that, and you should also have the same layout person every time. That way we're sure that that person's doing it exactly the same way. Because if I have Ryan doing it today, I do it tomorrow, we may have a little bit different technique. So you want to make sure that your layout is always done by the same person, same tools every day.
Okay, and we could have done that with the herringbone on the 45. That would have been pretty cool. Well, now the important part about when you're gridding this out is I've got this box, and I'm going to set these tiles in one corner of this box. So if you can imagine this being all the way through your house, it comes down the entry of the hallways into the kitchen. We've got all these boxes marked out. We have to stay in the same corner every time to connect.
So when you lay out, what's your corner?
Well, it depends on the layout and how the cuts are going to fall. But whatever corner you decide, everyone has to stay into that. And so there's 3 real great benefits to gridding out a floor. Number 1, if you've got multiple installers and you have a place that is, like I said, a flowing installation that goes down the hallway and in a kitchen and stuff, you can put one guy at one end, one guy at another end. As long as everybody stays on their lines and in the right corner, they're going to connect. The other thing is it's a terrific way to go around obstacles. So if we're going to be doing some tile and we have to tile around this stage, if you try to do that with spacers, it's going to be very, very difficult to connect. So if I've gridded that out, it's going to be a lot easier to get around an obstacle. The other one is, all of the cut sizes before you get started.
So I could make all the cuts and we'd save time.
You can
before we move the thin set.
Yeah, oftentimes we worked in 3-man crews. I would be spreading mortar. One guy would be bringing the mortar and tile, and another guy was making all of my cuts ahead of me because the whole thing was gridded out. But one of the best advantages is you can go in with your homeowner, your designer, and you can measure around and say, hey, you got a 10-inch cut here, you got an 8-inch cut there, you got a 4-inch cut here. You know what every cut is before you even get started. And that's great communication, and you don't have too many problems with layout when you have it gridded out and you've shown that to the customer.
But the biggest thing about gridding a system, and we have a couple people here that do that, is time. Because I can have my helper, Rob and I could be working in separate parts. Once we pulled our key line in 3, 4, 5 rooms, I can go in room A, he can room B, we all have the same key line. We can go around, we'll have our helper making all the cuts around the perimeter, and actually you can make every cut in this room except for 2 with a snap cutter. So you can put a snap cutter right behind him or her. They can go around and make every one of the perimeter cuts in A room, B room, C room. The only time we have to go to the wet saw is for the 2 at the doorway. They're L cuts at the doorway if we're flowing out through that doorway. So it's all about saving time. We can make a lot more time than trying to do a little bit on each project the same way. But we're just doing the entire room or the entire building, which is multiple rooms all at the same time.
Right, and when you grid it out, that initial time expense of getting the grid lines, it's worth it. You make it up in time when you go back and you've got all your, you can have someone go ahead and cut. But the communication is great. It's our responsibility to make sure that they're happy with the layout and we have a good defendable layout. So with all these complex shapes and different things that we're putting tile in, gridding it out really gives you an idea what your cuts are going to be, and knowing those ahead of time is going to save you guys a lot of hassle. But you can see in this grid here, I'm sitting on the line and in this corner. So if I was to grid out the whole job, one thing that we always did was we just put an X in every box in the corner that we were going to set in.
So you're my layout, guys, so you're going to pick a corner. And you've already picked a corner.
Yeah, lower left, this way.
I'm a lower left guy as well.
Yeah.
So we would actually go through and mark every lower left box in the entire area so that if I was going to pull Ryan in tomorrow to help set, all I have to say is lower left. You're going to say lower left. And really where this is critical, what Rob said, if we had a room that was a hallway and we went down a hallway into a kitchen and turned again, because when we're now here this way, it's lower left. But if I'm going down the hallway and turning that corner and I turn, it's now upper left.
That's right.
So you've got to make sure that you do your grid layout accurately and your installer layout person has marked all those boxes. And so everything is marked before he starts.
So here's another way that you can do it. If we were laying this on a 45, I could get my first, and this is a long enough tile in a small enough area, I can just use it as my straight edge. I can get my first line here. There's a chalk line.
And this is not the only way we could have gotten a 45, but this is a quick way in a small area that's accurate enough for us to work.
Yeah. And so hand me that tile again. So now I'm going to get my framing square and I'm going to...
Are we laying this straight or?
We're going to lay it on a 45. So here's where I want to start my pattern. So I take my framing square. Could use a laser, you could do 3, 4, 5. I think we showed 3, 4, 5 in the last episode. How many of you guys use 3, 4, 5 or have used it in the past? Okay.
Whoa, that's even more, that's great.
Yeah. It's you know, lasers are great, but you know, on a really big project, sometimes a laser gets out about 40 foot, that beam gets pretty wide. And you know, you could do 30, 40, 50 or something like that, and you're going to end up with a lot squarer layout, you know.
And if you're really tight on a layout, especially if we're talking about a rectified tile with an 1/8" grout joint, that laser at 40 feet might be every bit of a 1/4 inch wide. So do you want that side of the line, this side of the line, or something in the middle? That's the critical point.
We got such a... There we go.
I don't think you have a flat substrate.
No,
there,
we don't have a very flat substrate. And guess what, guys? We're going to fix this. Is it tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, come back. We're gonna. This is all kinds of jacked up. We're going to talk about our responsibilities of when we see that something's wrong, we need to fix it and how to fix it. Okay. Good? You need to come over, it's that arrow down there, the one closest to you. Over, 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 over. Right there. Okay. So now we can grid this out. We'll set this tile right on here. And we're going to figure our grout joint 3/16 of an inch. And this is going to be our grid size right here. Put your dead on that line. So we're at 23 and 15/16. We could almost call it, we could spread that out to, let's spread that out to 24. I think we can do that. That makes it really easy math. So basically if it's 24, you know, we got 24, 2 foot, 4 foot, 6 foot, 8 foot. We just basically come off of these lines. Here, I'm gonna go 2 and 4. If I can get that, hold that on there for me. Hang on just a second. I don't know if I can get 4 foot or not. We'll do 2 foot anyway. Now another big part of this is you don't want your tape to be out of square. You want to keep running parallel with the lines that you have here. All right. 24-inch layout, that's pretty lucky.
So this looks like a grid pattern on a 45.
That's exactly what it is.
There we go.
So I just continue on. I keep with my 24 inches. And the further away you can get the numbers, like I want to take this number as far away as I can, because that's going to end up keeping everything more square. Anytime you go through a doorway or something like that with your pattern, it's probably a good idea to double check, make sure you're staying square. Am I on that line? I'm on there. Okay.
So which side do you want to go on?
Let's do lower left.
Is this left?
Yeah. Okay, so you can see I'm actually setting on the line on 2 sides here. And
there's my grout joint.
There's my grout joint. So this next piece is going to set on the line. And again, I would just come 24 inches off of here, 24 inches off of there. Of course, this goes like that. But it'll set on
Oh, I
the
thought
line.
you changed the pattern on me.
No, we're doing herringbone on a 45. So remember, guys, basically just find the center, create an X. That's going to give you equal sized cuts, herringbone on a 45, or come off of the end like I did here. Just measured to the center, took my 45, I took my speed square and came at a 45-degree angle, set that off the center point like this. That's your 2 options for herringbone on a 45.
So we've shown you 2 ways to set this up, both of which we're going to use a grid. That way the grid is going to keep us as accurate. We can make all the cuts around the perimeter. Then we mix thin set, and we go to set tile, we're ready to go. Rob, we're just about out of time.
Yeah.
So anybody have any questions? Yes,
Question.
sir.
Say again?
What happens when you cover up all your lines?
Well, that's a great question. You have to be carefully spread, and some of them you can cover. And what I mean by that is, let's say I've got a 20-foot row. His question was, what happens when you cover up the lines with inset? That's a great question. Well, you get pretty good at spreading inside of the box, but some of these lines I don't necessarily need the entirety of the line. So if this is a 20-foot run, I could basically spread in between my 24-inch lines and just leave this intersection. Just leave a small area with this intersection and make sure that that tile, and leave this line that's right in front of my knees. So these are the important lines, this area right here. So these between, if you've got a wide open area, you can cover those. But you have to be kind of particular about how you spread mortar. That's a great
And
question.
the other thing you can do also is you can set a laser up, pick up that line, and you can spread right through. And that's
Yeah.
the beauty of a laser, because it's a short area. You can spread it, put the laser back on your key point, set it, and you can go right through it.
Yeah.
Saves
Yeah.
a heck of a lot of time. And really, in that case, you can actually set up 2 lasers for a diagonal herringbone. You can pick up both sides, just go. It's a really fast way. So thank you. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Artie.
Concrete back in the day, people keep their lines, they use like a hairspray. Is that like a bond breaker then?
The question, what his statement was, that wasn't really a question. His statement was, a lot of guys like to pop their lines and then they use hairspray over top of it to keep the line. That's really a bad idea because it's a bond breaker. So when you spread your thin set mortar across it, you have no bond to that surface. Now, if you could keep the line really small, maybe, but I don't think hairspray is going to do that. It's going to be a wide pattern. So then you get that hairspray becoming a bond breaker. The thin set will not mechanically bond to your substrate, in this case concrete or backerboard or whatever it might be.
So they make
it's not a
ink
good
lines.
idea.
Yeah.
One thing that what I did was when we had key points like this one, I would run those over and I would put the mark on the wall. So then I can go back next week. If we got pulled off the job, I could come back next week. My layout's already done. All I've got to go back do is pick up those lines again, snap my lines, or set my laser up, and we're good to go. We didn't lose any time.
Yeah.
That's true of a job, because when you're on a commercial project, you've got everybody walking across your work.
Yeah.
We're about out of time.
Yeah.
Timmy, do you have something you want to do?